Hello everyone, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and today is a very special day because it's episode number 245 of Goulet Q&A. That's really the only reason why. There's not anything else going on, at least that I'm aware of today. But anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about sparking joy, about double broad nibs, and total pen and ink deal breakers, among some other things. So I hope you enjoyed today. This past weekend, Rachel and I got to enjoy some time at the Great Wolf Lodge in Williamsburg. If you've ever been, if you're not around the East Coast, you probably never heard of it, but it's basically like a giant indoor water park inside this big like mountain lodge themed hotel. Lots of stuff for kids to do, activities, little mini bowling, there's an arcade, there's all this kind of stuff. It's really kind of geared for kids. And we had never been there with our kids. So we took them there for the first time this weekend because we had a long weekend because we were closed for President's Day, even though our kids had school. So that was kind of interesting. So we took them there over the weekend. They didn't miss any school, but they had an absolute blast. Rachel and I were completely exhausted, but we got back and we had a rest day on President's Day, sort of. I mean, we still worked because we're self-employed and that's the thing you do, because we just love it so much. But anyway, so it was kind of fun to be off when our kids had school. That very rarely happens. But anyway, so that was kind of cool. And then Tuesday we had Dante Del Vecchio come and visit from Peniter. You might have seen me tease out a little bit on my personal Instagram a video that we are going to do where he shows us how to assemble the new Peniter avatar that's going to be coming out in the next week or two. And yeah, it's a pretty cool pen. It assembles with no glue and no special tools. And it's really kind of fascinating how it's engineered. So the genius of Dante kind of at work there. And then we also get to smash the pens with hammers. Anyway, nice little Easter egg there for you. But yes, that definitely does happen. So be on the lookout for that video. It should be nice and entertaining. Dante is a trip. So anyway, he explains kind of the idea of a pen from concept to final assembly. So it's pretty fascinating insight into kind of what goes on behind the scenes. So anyway, that's pretty fascinating. I'm going to briefly talk about the Franklin Christoph Cosmic Dust that we had for like 3 hours, and now it's gone forever. I know it kind of sucks the way that we went about it because not everybody got to even know about it or had a chance to get it. The thing is, when we get so limited on pens like this, we know that there's just no good way to go about it. So we tried something different this time. We tried just limited exposure through it. I talked about it in Q&A here. A Q&A was up for like 45 minutes before we sold out. And it was just so tough. We posted on Goulet Nation and did a select email send out. But it was tough because we didn't have this up on the product page ahead of time. So we didn't really have the ability to announce you know, a timed launch or anything like that. So we're talking about that as a leadership team, just how we went about that, how we may want to do it differently in the future. Please forgive us if you really wanted this pen and you feel slighted. That was not our intention at all. It is just really tough when you have such a pen that you know, people would anticipate. We've been getting asked about Franklin Christoph for years, and they're really good to work with. They just don't have the capacity to produce that many pens. So it was unfortunate that we only have them for so little time, but if you did get one, it's definitely very special that you did, so please appreciate it. Or pass it on to someone else who would appreciate it more. Anyway, so it was still kind of cool to be able to do that. Came and went. And then there's some other things that have come in this week, some exciting stuff. One of which is the bunch of different Lamy things, actually. We briefly had the Studio Olive and Terracotta last year. And these are $79.20. Stainless steel nibs, extra fine through medium. These are swappable nibs with any of your other Lamys. Comes with a converter, and yeah, you get to enjoy this kind of nice matte kind of finish that it has to them. Kind of reminiscent of the first couple of Safari colors that came out, which was the, what was it called? The Safari, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking out on it. What the heck was it called? Can't remember, shame on me. But anyway, it is kind of reminiscent of those first two Safari colors. But they're not really leaning hard into that with their promotion of it. It's just something that I'm like, you know, these are the same colors as the originals, right? Anyway, and then what else have we got? We have the Lamy Scala Rose. So this is a nice kind of a pinkish color, very sort of on theme with the Lamy pastels, like the Safaris, they're going to be coming out with a little bit later. It's got a similar kind of finish to those Studios. The scale in general is just a little more expensive a pen, not 100% sure why necessarily. It's got the same nib and everything as the Studios. It's just the design of the pen itself. I don't know, maybe it's more expensive to manufacture or something. But anyway, it is $143.20, available in extra fine through medium. That's with a steel nib. And then there is the Ion in both red and blue. Boom. So the Ion's a pretty cool pen. I'm actually a fan of this. Some people, the complaint that I really hear about it is you can like twist the cap with it on here because it's a snap cap and it twists a little easy for some people's preferences, and that's fine. Everybody's got their different preferences. That's okay. I'm totally digging the blue. This is like just the right shade of blue for me, if I gotta be quite honest. The red is really interesting. It's not like a bright like fire engine red. It's got a little bit of an orange hint to it, which is kind of cool. And I thought I would show you just a couple other Lamy pens to kind of compare it to. Well, first off, the blue, really close to the Ocean Blue All-Star. A little more of a brushed finish to it, so that makes it look a little bit different, but it's just a tad darker than the blue, the Ocean Blue, which I don't know, I kind of dig the Ion color blue just a tad more. It's just a bit richer than the Ocean Blue, but they're both really nice pens. And then the red Ion looks really interesting. I actually have several red pens that it kind of looks similar to, so I thought like, okay, let me compare it to the Copper Orange All-Star. Definitely not as orange as that, but let me hold it next to the Ruby Red All-Star. Okay, so it's not like a ruby red color. From some of the images and promotion I'd seen, I thought maybe it might end up more this color, but no, it's a little more orange. It actually is kind of dead on to the Lamy Studio Wild Rubin from maybe about 5 years ago or so. Very similar to that, slightly more brush texture, but almost identical in color to that. So if you happen to miss out on that and you really liked it, you can have a rebirth of it in your Ion. Ion is $79.20, stainless steel nib, extra fine through medium. As you see, is a trend that seems to be most of the pens that bring into the US is extra fine through medium, because broads just don't sell that well, unfortunately, for Lamy. What else have we got? The Emporium Rose Gold Limited Edition. You can tell we just got like a big Lamy shipment in, right? Because we have all this stuff at once. So this comes in a big fancy box. Ta-da! There you go, lots of little things going on here. Bottle of ink, Lamy black ink in here. And this one is a nice, it's like a pearl white color. It's called Rose Gold. It's like a pearly white kind of color. And then it's got a, let's see if it'll focus on it instead of my face. Boom, nice. And it's got rose gold trim. And then this has the 14 karat gold nib on it. And it's got that beautiful two-tone action going on there. Yeah, see that? Sort of. Oh my gosh, that is impossible to show. There you go, you can kind of see it. Very interesting grip going on here. Kind of reminds me of the Lamy Persona of the 1990s, of which I actually have one, so it kind of is reminiscent of that a little bit. A lot of different textures here. It's a very bumpy kind of pen. So if you like to feel interesting textures, it's nice. It's not like a, you know, sometimes when you have, like, I think like the grip of the TWSBI 580 ALR, how it's got like really fine ridges and it can kind of like, some people really love it and some people are like, ooh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. This one is a little smoother and the bumps are bigger, so it's not quite as, I think it'll be less polarizing probably. But the accents are really nice. The rose gold trim is great and the white is, it looks really good. You know, this pen's a little pricier. This one gets you up to $439.20, so it won't be for everyone. But if you really like it and you like that writing experience of those Lamy gold nibs, it is pretty awesome. Of course, you can get a similar gold nib to that on some of the Studios and some other less expensive pens. I think one of the CP1s has it. So it is possible. But anyway, that's what we got going on there. And we got Monteverde Coral ink that arrived. That was announced this past weekend at the LA Pen Show, so that's here now. And then we have the Montegrappa Elmo in black, and that just arrived. This is a, so far we've had the Elmo as our exclusives in both the Rosso Ciliegia and the green one. which the Italian name is slipping my mind at the moment. But now we have the black one. This is not an exclusive of ours. You'll be able to find this elsewhere. So they're making these a little greater quantities, and the price is a little bit lower at $156. So if you liked this format of pen, maybe didn't like the particular colors we had, but you're excited about having an Italian-made pen with this beautiful Jowo nib. I really like the way that Monograppa does their nibs. See if you can get in on that a little bit. Maybe. A really attractive looking nib. Writes really nicely. Number 6 size, Jowo stainless steel nib. Standard international converter, takes cartridges and all that. Nice writing pen. Comes in a nice box too. Like if you're gonna gift a pen to somebody, this is a really good presentation to do it. Very hefty, very solid looking presentation. So if that happens to matter too, yeah, then you have that option as well. And this one is available in extra fine through broad. So they got a broad option on this one. So we got those available now. Yeah, and there's more stuff coming. We're gonna start to get into some more new things coming, especially from Lamy. Here in the next several weeks. We're just waiting on some shipments of things to arrive, and hopefully that'll be good. Still not received our shipment of Lamy Crystal ink bottles. We've had some samples, but still waiting on the bottles. It's taken a little while, but that's okay because good things are worth waiting for, right? All right, let's get into the questions for this week. I have 6 of them for you. Originally I had 7, and then I totally forgot to bring something from home that I needed for a demonstration, so I pared it down to 6. So I apologize about that. But anyway, we will show you more about that. Maybe I'll save it for Q&A next week. Anyway, pen and writing questions to kick us off. Mosifus Jennison on Instagram says, everyone seems to have that one fountain pen quality that can instantly make a pen or ink a no-go. For me, it's bleed through, so I tend to use dry inks, relatively dry nibs and feeds, and fountain pen friendly paper. What is your pen feature or quality that can instantly make a pen or ink not for you? And Rachel's. So it's actually kind of funny because I'm pretty much the opposite. I love wet gushing pens, and bleed through doesn't really bother me so much. I really control the paper that I use in a lot of the environments. Part of the benefit of running your own company is you get to choose what kind of paper that you have around the office, especially when you sell nice fountain pen friendly paper. So I really don't run into bleed through situations quite as much, even when using my wet and gushing pens. I would probably feel very differently if I was working, in a place where I had less control over the paper. But anyway, that is my unique scenario, and I must recognize it as such. Even still, when I do have bleed through, yeah, it's annoying, but it's not a deal breaker for me. It's more of a deal breaker for the paper, because that tends to be what I associate it with. But specifically with pen and ink, with me, I like really wet, really gushing pens. I like to be able to see my ink, hence also why the paper is so important, to pull it up a little bit, and so I see that shading, see that color and line variation and stuff. You just don't see that with really absorbent paper. I do not love scratchy or toothy nibs. That's probably not super uncommon. Most people don't love scratchy feeling nibs, but me really, that's like the smoother the better. I mean, I pretty much can't get enough. That's one thing for me. I just tend to be more of that spectrum. So a scratchy, kind of really toothy feeling pen, that's pretty much a deal breaker. Though I will say, since I've learned how to kind of smooth and tune nibs and stuff like that for my own use, at least, it hasn't been as much of an issue, because if I really hate it, I can just change it. Anyway, so pens with really, the things that I can't control now, pens with really thin grips kind of bug me, because I have big hands, and I just, if I have to hold this really thin pen, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I will do it if I have to. Even like the Pilot Metropolitan, as much as I love that pen, I can't write with it for long periods of time because the grip is so thin. And ironically enough, as I'm saying this, I'm like a walking contradiction here. I do carry around the Traveler's brass pen with me, which has one of the thinnest grips of any pen. And I will write it for quick notes, but if I have to write more than like one sentence with this thing at a time, I want to throw it. But that's okay, because it can take it. So clearly it hasn't been a total deal breaker, but the reason I really like that pen is because you cannot destroy it. It is basically indestructible. So maybe I should swap it out with one of Dante's Unbreakables here, but I like the size of that pen. It seems to work for me, even though the thin grip is normally a total deal breaker for me. That's why I'm not a huge fan of like the Lamy CP1 and stuff like that. It's just too thin for me. Pens with threaded posting on the back too, I don't love those. Posting for me is something that's kind of hit or miss anyway, of whether or not I'll actually post a pen when I write with it. It really depends on the balance and how much it throws off that balance. And I have bigger hands too, so usually a heavier back-weighted pen doesn't bother me as much as somebody with smaller hands where it might have even more leverage and feel even more back-weighty. But anyway, for me, if I have to unscrew a pen and then screw it onto the back and then start writing, forget that. Unless I love the pen enough where I'm willing to write with it just unposted. I basically would treat it as an unposted pen at that point. I just do not like back threads. Not for me. Which ironically enough, that's like all the pens that I made back in the day when I was making pens. They had to be back threaded because that's the kits that I would buy would have back threads. Anyway, and then as far as inks go, I really don't like flat, chalky ink, especially weak reds, like weak pinky reds, like, ugh, not for me. It's just weird. Some people love that stuff. I just, no interest whatsoever in any of those. I like really bold colors and stuff like that. I like to see saturation. I like to see color variation, shading. These are the things like ever since the first day when I wrote with a fountain pen, when I was 25, this was nearly 10 years ago now, I wanted to see deep saturated shading colors. I didn't even know shading was a thing, but as soon as I saw it on the first ink that I used, I was like, ooh, this is what I want forever, always, all my inks. Pretty much, and it hasn't really changed that much. That's been pretty consistent for me. So the flat kind of chalky colors, just not for me. Like there's, not to pick on noodlers, but there's a couple of noodlers like eternal, like the permanent colors. I think especially like some of the polar colors where you're really buying it more for freeze resistance, but like polar green, noodlers periwinkle, they're more for the extreme properties of those inks. But they just look really flat in color, and that's not uncommon with like highly permanent inks. I'm thinking like the Diatramentis document inks are kind of like that too. They don't shade quite as much. They're more just a flat color. That can have a really good application, but it's just not as appealing to me. And then I asked Rachel what are some of her turn-offs with pens, I guess. When she has something with a prominent triangular grip, she's not a fan. She's got a 4-finger grip, and when she has a prominent triangle, it just forces her to hold a pen in a way that she doesn't want to, and she doesn't appreciate that. She has nothing in yellow. She just does not like yellow ink or pens, and nothing with snakes. She hates snakes, completely just freaked out by them. Anything with a pattern, theme, color, naming, nothing. No snake-related anything will fly with Rachel. And she's really picky about texture too. I kind of mentioned the 580 ALR just a minute ago. She does not like the way that grip feels, and she just is not a fan of those like really fine kind of ridges and stuff like that. I just kind of feel it's very unappealing to her. Me, I'm not bothered by it at all, actually. In fact, I find it kind of interesting. So to each his or her own, and that's a little insight into what tends to be deal breakers for the two of us. All right, next one is from carrkicksdoor on Instagram. What's the best way to protect the end of a glass pen when not in use? This is a pertinent question because I currently have a glass pen sitting on my desk, so I took this one. I don't know about the best way, to be quite honest with you, because I'm no glass pen authority, but I'll at least share with you my own little life hack that I have for protecting it. So when I'm actively using a glass pen like this one, I wouldn't say actively using, I actively used this glass pen a couple of weeks ago. Did not clean it because I just haven't brought it over to the sink yet to clean it. So it's been sitting on my desk for quite some time, just inside a little plastic bag. So it didn't get everything all inky, and sitting inside this like disposable tray here that is just nothing fancy, along with a syringe that I also need to clean out, and a spare nib that I yanked out of some random pen. So this is just how my desk goes sometimes, especially when things get really busy. Anyway, so a pen tray can be really handy. This is just like a tray that certain pens that will receive from distributors and stuff like that will give us. You can't buy those anywhere. I mean, I'm sure you can buy them somewhere, but they're not readily available. So that's maybe not so helpful a recommendation. But what I really do when I want to truly protect the end of a pen is I use this very simple device, an ink sample vial. And what I'll do is I'll take an ink sample vial with maybe a tissue or a little bit of paper towel or something. I'll just, tear off a little strip of it, maybe like a 2 by 3 inch or something like that. It doesn't need to be huge. And then you just take it and you can just kind of wrap the glass pen in it. And you just shove it on in the ink sample vial. And that gives it enough protection so it can knock around inside the vial. Gives it a little bit of padding, and you basically have a protected glass pen. If you want to, you can take a little Scotch tape and you can just kind of wrap it around. Makes it a little more portable too, but that's kind of like the simplest, most straight up way to do it. You may have some ink samples laying around. You may have some vials left over. It can be handy for things like this. If you have an ink sample vial holder, then you can even set it in your vial holder and you can have it sticking out and you don't have the nib exposed where you can knock it or whatever. So it can be really handy with just kind of a simple, maybe things you might have around the house kind of situation. Not everybody has these sitting around the house, but you may be able to find some other kind of creative container that's close enough to it to do it. So anyway, that is my solution. That's what I've been using. Another thing that can be handy is pen tubes. You probably don't have these laying around, and I meant to show you kind of what these are. I don't know that I have one actively around, but basically they're these like tubes that connect together, and it's kind of useless without me being able to show you what it is, so I'm just going to move on. But anyway, there's these things called pen tubes that you can buy. They're made for like shipping individual pens, and they come in 2 sections. You could possibly use that for storing. That's probably better for if you like want to transport a glass pen or something. But anyway, that's pretty much what I do. Hope that helps you out. Smurl146 on Instagram. No, Smurl46 on Instagram. Excuse me. Smurl146. I don't know who you are. But Smurl46 says, you don't seem to carry double broad nibs where they are available. For example, Kaweco. Why not? Is it not enough demand? Yep, pretty much. I'll elaborate, but yeah, that's basically the answer. Globally, there's just not a ton of demand for double broad nibs, so manufacturers seldom don't offer them in general. A lot of them are even cutting back on broad nibs in general. The ones that do, it's often only by special order, especially in the US. Double broads are extremely unpopular. So the only brands that I know really that kind of even offer them are Kaweco and Lamy. That are even available by special order. I think Pelican even is paring back their double broads and oblique double broads and things like that. They're cutting them back from, I don't know if it's offering them at all or just in the US, but I know we are not even able to special order those anymore, whereas we used to be able to. We dipped our toes in the water with the Lamy 2000 double broad because Lamy 2000 is one of our more popular pens, and we thought, okay, if we are going to have any success with a double broad, you would think it would be with a pen that is already pretty popular. It's done okay. We did like a special order for it. It took forever to get them in. And then it kind of hasn't really blown us away with how popular it's been. So we still have plenty of those if you are interested in any Lamy 2000 double broads, but it just doesn't give us a lot of confidence about doing a Kaweco double broad order because it's going to take a long time to get in. We're going to have to buy large quantities, and it's going to sit there for a while. And you have to commit to the colors and stuff like that. So it just makes it really, really difficult. Now, I will say there is a resurgence with broad nibs. Maybe that'll translate into double broads. It seems like broads were kind of on the decline for, the previous, 7-8 years. The last couple of years, it seems like broad may be starting to come back, really in the last 9 months or so. Rachel likes to take credit for, or we like to give Rachel credit for helping to bring broads back. But anyway, it's just difficult to say. It's kind of like this chicken and the egg situation. It's like, well, of course they're not going to be popular if nobody offers them, but if nobody offers them, they're going to be popular. And this kind of thing of how are they going to become popular if you don't offer them? But if they're not going to be popular, then why would you offer them? And you just never know. So until we hear like resounding door beating down, kind of feedback of where are all these double broads, and the double broads that are available get snatched up immediately, and all the broads are getting snatched up and everybody's crying out for broader. I don't really foresee manufacturers getting into expanding drastically into double broads, and we will only if you all start banging down our doors for them, because so far they have not been selling. And that's how we pay our bills. So, all right. Next question. This is an ink question from TayWeb91 on Instagram. I would love to know how y'all take the pictures on your website to showcase ink. How do y'all do the big splatters, and how do you get so many colors and sheens to pull out in one photo? I would love to be able to play around with some of that myself. Okay, this is a good probing question, and you know, I talked to Sarah and Whitney a little bit about, you know, if they wanted to reveal some of their insights, because they're the ones doing it. Sarah in particular is pretty passionate about doing these, and I think Sarah's going to be willing to be on a Right Now with us, maybe next week. So I'm talking with her about preparing for that. So she's behind the camera almost all the time. Very, very rarely kind of peeks her head out, but she was interested in doing this one. So we'll see how that goes, but I'll at least give you the basic principles here, and then I'll let her do more of the demonstration. So first off, the paper matters a lot. If you're really absorbent paper, it's just not going to show off the ink a lot. So going with a really thick, glossy, not necessarily thick, non-absorbent, you know, paper that will show off the ink really well. Tomoe River is really like tops. That just pulls out a lot of sheen, pulls out a lot of shimmer, really shows it well. So that tends to be a good go-to. You get some really interesting color variation, especially with Tomoe River, because it's relatively thin. It tends to buckle the paper a little bit when you really dump it on heavy. So it gives you sort of that wavy kind of like, gives you a lot of different color variation within that kind of sheeny, you know, ink situation that can happen sometimes. You got to put lots of ink down. You got to really let it pool up and then let it dry. The more that it dries, the more of that sheen and shimmer and stuff is going to really show. And it can change color quite a bit as it's drying. So sometimes it can take a little bit for it to dry. And then different colors just kind of like show up. So that can change a little bit based on how much ink you put down. Letting it dry fully, you'll get the most sheen there. And then lighting conditions itself can affect it too. Natural light, different light colors, how much is on there, how close it is, how bright it is, all that can impact it as well. I'm not as intimately familiar. I've messed around with it a little bit myself. I'll let Sarah explain the technique her technique when she does it, because she's the one who shot a lot of those images you see on our site. But basically, it's an ink syringe is the tool that is really handy. You can use a straw or something like that if you don't have a syringe handy. But you basically just take an ink syringe, you know, suck it up in there, and you can, if you want to get like more of a splatter effect, you can suck up just a little bit of ink in there, and you can more like shoot it, like put a lot of pressure behind it, maybe with a little air behind it too. So if you don't fill the syringe with ink, you maybe fill it a little bit with ink, pull it out of the ink bottle, and then fill with more air, and then you can kind of shoot, and if it has a little air behind it, that's where you get the good spatters that happen. But if you want to get a good pooling, of course, you can just dump a ton on there. You can kind of like spread it around into a pattern that makes it look nice if you're going for a particular type of shape or something like that. And then you can also use this syringe to kind of like act like a, little air squirter. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it can help once the ink is down on the paper. You can take the syringe and you can actually, kind of encourage the ink to spread out and go in certain directions. So you can play around with that. So this is a really handy tool for that job. But you can also use, a medicinal style eyedropper. That can be handy too. And you can get some interesting effects. You can use just like a drinking straw or like a coffee stir, that's like a straw type. So there's lots of tools that you can kind of use. You're really just trying to get the ink to get in a general shape of what you want. And then you want to mix in a little bit of randomness to get some of that natural effect. So we'll talk more about that hopefully in the future and do some little demonstrations and stuff. But that's the basic principle, I think. And then just kind of as a blanket statement, we try to show some of the best of what an ink is capable of doing when we show those types of images. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different when it's in a pen because it's not putting down as much of the volume of ink. It's not maybe naturally going to, if you just dump some out of an ink bottle, it's not naturally going to make this glorious, beautiful splatter necessarily. There's a little bit of coaxing that we do to make it look good for the photos, but we are not like using artificial ingredients or anything like that. It is all the natural ink that's down there when we're doing it. Cool? So you can have fun with that, test it out, test out some of your photography skills. Sarah will probably give more details of like how she actually takes the photos and ISOs and all that kind of stuff. So it could be fun. All right, this next one is a business question. This is from WhamG182 on Twitter. If a pen says closeout on your store, does that mean only Goulet will not be offering it anymore, or it's being discontinued altogether? Okay, this is a good question, and the answer is it could be either. For sure, it means that we're not going to be offering it anymore. So we've closed it out of our store. We're not going to be offering it anymore. Oftentimes, we'll couple it with a discount of some kind because we're, one, trying to encourage it to move on its journey and no longer be a part of our offering, and also because once we discontinue something and stop carrying it, we have a harder time replacing it, supporting it, with returns and exchanges and stuff like that. So we have that built into part of the policy when something is listed as closeout. We're not as easily able to swap it out and stuff like that. So, related to your question here, sometimes we'll close things out just because it hasn't really sold well for us. It's just kind of sitting there. Not a lot of you are interested in it, and we just kind of want to move on. It's taking up shelf space. It's taking up space on the website. It's taking up time and attention, and we just want to move it on. Sometimes it's getting replaced, so there might be a new color or a change of a feature or something is coming out, and we think the existing model is maybe too similar. We just want to move the old one through and bring in the new one, much like you would have seasonality in clothing. It's not that anything is wrong with the old one. It's just, less in vogue, less in fashion. So we're moving the old one out and moving it through. That happens sometimes. There could be any number of reasons of why we might choose to discontinue something. But sometimes it is prompted from the manufacturer. So it goes into closeout. It might be the end of a special edition, and they are saying we need to move it out and we need to get going on the next one. So they'll encourage it and say, yep, we're closing this thing out and it's going. Sometimes a manufacturer might discontinue something that maybe isn't getting replaced, but it's just flat out they just don't want to make it anymore, or it just wasn't popular, or it wasn't profitable, or whatever it might be. There could be any number of business decisions why that would happen. Sometimes there's a change in design. So, for example, the Pineider Avatar, or there might be a number of pens like that they came up with a design. They're redesigning it, so they let the old ones sell out. They bring in the new ones, and it kind of replaces it. That can happen sometimes too. Doesn't necessarily mean anything was wrong with the old one. They're just bringing in new stuff. We try to put notations on the product pages when it's discontinued from the manufacturer. We haven't been 100% diligent about that, though, I'll be completely honest, because sometimes it's just a lot to keep up with. We have 4,500 different SKUs on our site, different products, not products, because sometimes a product can be broken down by, basically if you have one pen in one color, there might be 4 different nib sizes. That's 4 SKUs, and that could be, anybody who's been in retail, what SKUs are. And that can just be a lot to keep up with. So it's difficult for us to do that. Sometimes we'll do it, but if we have like one pen left, it's not necessarily time effective for us to go through and change all the wording and communicate all that across multiple different, places on the site and stuff like that. So sometimes it just we just put it on closeout, it goes, and it's kind of forgotten about at that point. But we usually do try to communicate when it's something from the manufacturer. Sometimes the US will discontinue something, but the manufacturer will still make it. So, if we're buying something from, a manufacturer that is not from the US and they have US distributor, that everything comes through and then we buy from that distributor. That happens with a lot of different brands. It might be something that's selling really well in Europe or in Asia, and it just is tanking in the US. So the US distributor will kind of just let it sell through, and then they won't carry anymore, and it'll keep selling in other parts of the world. So you might see an offering somewhere else, and it might get discontinued in the US. that gets a little tougher for us because we are like, well, it is sort of discontinued from the manufacturer. You won't be able to find it as easily in the US, but see, that gets really difficult because then we have to go in a kind of a hunt for information about why it was discontinued and what's going to happen to it and all that kind of stuff. That can be challenging for us, particularly if it's a product that really hasn't been selling well for us. We generally have the feeling that like not really anybody's going to care to know great detail. Is this still going to be available somewhere else in the world, or has it been discontinued for good? So we usually don't go through all those steps to try to find that out unless it's like something that we feel is really important and we want to communicate that proactively on our closeout page. But honestly, we just sometimes don't have that time and ability to do that. So that's when, you know, you can always ask us, ask our team, and then we'll know that you actually care. And once we know that you care, we'll go through and do that work and try and find that out if we are able to. But proactively to do that for every single thing we're closing out is really difficult because we try to close out a decent amount of stuff. I mean, we added 1,500 SKUs last year or somewhere close to that added. So think about that. You know, there's a lot of things that we're adding, and there's going to be some things that just really aren't selling that well. So we don't want to just continually add and build our catalog indefinitely, because then this big beautiful space that we have is going to be filled with things that really maybe aren't moving that much and is just cluttering up the website, making it harder for you to buy the things that you actually want to buy. So it is part of our duty as a retailer to pare down the things that maybe aren't as popular. So we are very diligent. We spend a lot of time on trying to do that right. But it's always a fine balance of like, how much information do we really need about why something was discontinued? Do people even care? It's going to be gone. You know, you're not going to get it anymore through our site, and that's kind of it. So I'd be open to feedback about that. If it's something really important, should we try to be more diligent about proactively communicating why something was discontinued? Because honestly, sometimes we don't know, and sometimes we can't get that information. So I can't ever guarantee that we're going to be 100% awesome about that, just because sometimes we're fighting an uphill battle there. But it's certainly something that has come top of mind. I've talked to Rachel about it. I'm like, yeah, let's really try to communicate more when we are discontinuing something but the manufacturer is not, that one's tougher. If we are discontinuing something that the manufacturer is not going to make anymore and you're not going to find it available anymore, then we feel more confident about saying, okay, it's been discontinued by the manufacturer. If we're discontinuing something, we don't necessarily know what the manufacturer is going to do moving forward. It could mean they discontinue it a month from now. We don't want to be wrong. So I don't know. That's just kind of where we're at. You know, the more we're thinking about things, the more we realize that our sites can sometimes be considered a source, sort of fountain pen news. So it is something for us to think about in terms of how we communicate that kind of stuff. But it is always a challenge for us to think about how much information do we give about the products that we're not going to have anymore, or that really haven't been selling well in the first place. So anyway, just something for us to think about. And then I'm going to end Q&A this week on a personal question from imfeelingcraftytoday on Instagram. How many pens do we really need? I got hooked on fountain pens and my collection has grown since then. The Spark Joy movement is making me rethink the number of pens I should have, since I only use one at a time, and having so much has made me feel queasy. My goodness. I'm really sorry that you're feeling queasy from how many pens you have. I don't know how many pens you have. Maybe you have 6 and it feels queasy to have more than one. Maybe you have 49 and you feel like you should only have 12. I really don't know. It kind of depends. And I just don't want you to feel queasy over your pens. I don't think that's really helpful for anybody. You know, I'll be honest, the whole Spark Joy thing, I think some of you are familiar with that from Marie Kondo's show Tidying Up. I haven't watched a full episode, just to be clear. I've watched little bits and pieces. I'm familiar enough with kind of the concept of it where I feel like I can at least touch on it, but I'm by no means an authority on it. But from what I understand, the idea when you go through her process is you take an object and you physically hold it, you feel whether it brings you joy or not, or whether that takes joy away. And if it brings you joy, you keep it, and if it takes joy away, you get rid of it, and you do that kind of categorically through the things you own. So if you're going in your closet, you'd take on your closet, you'd go through everything, feel the joy that each item brings you, and then if it doesn't bring you joy, you thank it for being involved in your life journey, and you move it on to bigger and better places that someone else might appreciate it more. So I can get on board with the concept, right? I'm a very tactile person myself. I definitely have some emotional attachments to particular objects. In this case, particularly pens. That's why I have so many of them. So for me with pens, I acquire them as part of my business, and my business is a huge part of my life's devotion for the last 10 plus years. So for me, the pens kind of represent steps in my own journey, my own devotion. I may have even had input into some of the design or aspects or color choices and things like that. Or there may be significant memories that I have tied to certain people that I do business with, certain team members that I was involved in launching or promoting or photographing or videoing or whatever might have been involved with doing something with that pen. I have those memories and that joy tied into the physical object of the pen. Now, I could take a picture of that pen and I could relive it through the picture, sure, but I'm a very kinesthetic person. For me, I love working with my hands. I'm very tactile, and that makes a huge difference for me. So for me, it's very different when I'm trying to just remember something with words or a picture, or I see a picture. It does spark some memories for me, but when I physically hold something in my hand, it's like a rush of memories and emotions and stuff like that that can sometimes come just from tactilely feeling something. So I do kind of get the concept of that whole sparking joy kind of thing. I don't know if I'm like super bought into it. Definitely has a little bit of a vibe of a fad to me. I don't know if this is like for the next 30 years in the United States, is this really going to be something that we're still talking about? Definitely feels a little bit like it came on really strong. And when I Googled, this whole methodology Spark Joy, I saw it just as many, if not more, like, spoofs and things that were like clickbaiting, like, should you really spark joy? Yes versus no, and all these type of things, so it's like, okay, so there's definitely a hype thing going on around it. It's become really popular really fast. Hard to say. I just don't know it well enough to really make an educated decision on that, and that wasn't really the point of what you were asking. For me, I have read some other things that have really touched me more in terms of my own kind of methodology of the things that I should keep in my life. One of them is a book, Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I've talked about this a number of times in Q&A before, and it's worth bringing up again because usually, kind of every time a new year comes, I usually think about the book Essentialism again. For me, it's where is it going? Essentialism. Similar vibe to Spark Joy, somewhat more geared towards pragmatism, a little less on the emotion of are you feeling joy, but there's a little bit of it in there. So with Greg McKeown's Essentialism, a couple of questions that he prompts specifically when he's talking about, and he uses the analogy of a closet too, is there's really kind of two questions to ask yourself. One of which is, if I didn't already own this, how much would I pay to acquire it? Because there's definitely an ownership bias of you tend to overvalue the things you already have as opposed to things that you don't already own. So you will place more value on something that you already have and don't use than you would from something that you are looking to buy. And they've done studies and stuff like that to prove that that's the case. So that's one question. If I didn't already own it, how much would I pay to acquire it? And if the answer is like, well, nothing, because this thing is garbage, you should really get rid of it. And then the other question is, do I love this? And that kind of crosses over into the whole Spark Joy thing. So I kind of get that, and I've gone through this before, especially like with the closet with clothes and stuff. My weight fluctuates a lot. For the journey of Q&A, my weight's fluctuated a lot, even as we have shot this. So it's been interesting for me. I definitely have certain clothes, and I'm like, it's been 3 or 4 years since I've fit into that shirt. Am I really going to be able to wear that thing again? It just is a reminder to me of what I'm not anymore, And so that really kind of stinks. Definitely doesn't bring me joy. I should probably get rid of that stuff. So yeah, I kind of get that. For me though, I think for most people, it's not really about a certain number of whatever it is. Pens, whatever it is you may have multiple things of, shoes, antique typewriters, if you collect those, whatever it is. I think, especially with such a passion-driven hobby or lifestyle, if you want to call it that, like fountain pens, really, it should all spark joy in your life. That's why we do this. That's why I'm sitting here shooting a video about pens, is because it brings me joy to shoot these videos. Like, really, if you're going to be involved in something for a long period of time, if you're going to devote yourself to it if it's going to be meaningful to you. It should really be something that's joyous and joyful in your life. And if it gets to the point where it feels like a burden, gosh, man, life is too short. Like, don't hang on to things that are a burden, whatever it is, you know. And yes, I know financially I should be incentivized to tell you you should buy as many pens as you possibly can and hang on to them forever. But no, really, like, this is a very passion-driven lifestyle. And I want the people that are into fountain pens to be truly happy and be truly into them and appreciate the pens they have and use them and love them. So even if it's going to make our company, Goulet Pens, slightly worse off, I would rather you be happy and really engaged with your fountain pen and writing experience than to just buy a lot of stuff, you know? Fountain pens are very personal. I think sometimes you're going to go on a bit of a journey to discover what you really like. I think the experience that you're talking about is not anything unusual to people that get into fountain pens and are in it for maybe 6 months to 18 months. Usually I think that seems to be, I don't have like hard data around that, but just from talking to a lot of people, that tends to be what happens is you're getting into it, especially if you're buying online, you don't have a physical store to like try things out or pen show or anything near you. You're having to really just kind of speculate as to what you might like. You're going to carry things around, you're going to use them, you're going to find that maybe you bought 10 different pens and there's 2 that you really love and enjoy, and the rest of them you're kind of like, oh, what do I do with these? I don't really know. And you may just have, 3 of them that you know you're never going to use again. A couple of them you might put in the rotation, and there's a couple that you really love and use all the time. So it's going to be an individual decision about how many pens is good for you to hang on to, how many are right for you, but I think it's a completely normal thing for people to get new and excited into fountain pens, to get really into it, start to acquire a lot of pens, and then start to realize like, oh my gosh, where am I going to store all these pens? I got the credit card bill and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, okay, I should really kind of rein it in a little bit. And then you're like, pendulum swings back the other way and you're like, why do I have so many pens? Oh my gosh, this feels like such a burden now. What do I do? And then you start to pare down some of your pens. You hang on to the ones you really love and you're like, yeah, this is starting to feel really good. And your pendulum will swing less dramatically over time as you're in the hobby longer. I just encourage you not to like let the pendulum swing all the way over here and like smack you back in the face, and then you just like cut it off and like the whole passion dies. That would be bad. Let the pendulum swing it back a little bit, adjust, find where is your happy place, wherever that happy number is for you, whether it's 800 or 2. Be self-aware about what it is that is bringing joy in your life. I think that's where that kind of like settles in for me. There's some people that I know that kind of cap themselves out at a certain number. They find that happy medium and they institute essentially kind of a 1 in, 1 out policy. Because, as you age and as you mature and you have different writing styles and you just have different preferences, there might be something, there may be a pen, for example, like I've traveled places that I'd never been before, and all of a sudden I have emotional connection to a place, or maybe a manufacturer that is a place. Like, for example, I went to Florence, and I had a connection to a Visconti pen that was made out of the marble that looks like the base out of the marble David, the statue of David, where I just really had an emotional experience when I saw that statue for the first time. And so I had a connection to that pen, even though it's really got nothing to do with David, but I had an emotional connection to that. And I had a desire to have this. So that would be the kind of thing, if I cap myself out at 8 pens, I would maybe get that one, cycle out another one, and keep that number and be happy. So that's one other way that you could go about it. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good method to go about it. So I don't think there's going to be a right answer for how many pens you should have, how many pens will bring you joy or whatever. But I do think it's important to be practical, to be pragmatic. Don't get into debt because of your pens. Buy within your means and just enjoy them however many you have, because they're just so enjoyable. Okay, question of the week for this week. I'm going to go back to a question that I answered already here. What is one attribute of a pen or ink that's just a total deal breaker for you? I'd love to hear that in the comments. You can check out a lot of what I talked about here on gouletpens.com. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you have not already. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks so much for watching, and write on.